a great way to retrain your brain out of chronic pain or illness. Don't L.C.T.T. Shift. What does that even mean? Well, this is a brain retraining exercise that myself and my team developed that we utilize with our clients to help them unlearn their chronic pain or chronic symptoms. Now, I talk lots about on this channel somatic tracking, somatic embodiment practices for chronic pain, chronic symptoms. And in those exercises, what you're doing is you're intentionally focusing on the sensations. You're intentionally focusing on and approaching the sensations of pain or physical symptoms, and you're trying to change the emotional response and the nervous system response to the symptoms. But outside of somatic tracking, somatic embodiment practices, what do you even do? What are you doing to retrain your brain? Well, the thing is you don't want to be doing this somatic focus on the sensations hours upon hours each day. That's too much. It's hyper focus. And for a lot of people with chronic pain or chronic symptoms, myself included when I had them, is we get so laser focused on them. We're always looking for them, checking for them, thinking about them, talking about them. There's this obsession with the sensations, which I totally get. When I had debilitating widespread chronic pain, the most important thing was for me to check on my symptoms, to make sure they weren't getting too intense, and to try to do everything I can to try to make them go away. But this excessive focus, this fixation, this obsession actually trains your brain that there is something really wrong with your body. There's something really concerning, and it just amplifies it. It keeps this sensitization cycle going where you have pain or symptoms, and then you have this dysregulated response, negative thoughts, negative behaviors, nervous system dysregulation, and it just increases the pain or physical symptoms, and it spirals out from there. More pain or symptoms, more dysregulation, more pain or symptoms. Maybe you relate to this. And so to heal, we need to retrain our brain to not always be looking, checking, thinking, or talking about the sensations. And so that's why I developed this brain retraining exercise. Don't L.C.T.T. Shift. So we're going to dive into this. I'm going to explain how you can start to utilize it, but it does take some practice. It takes some consistency to do this because for myself, I was so obsessed about my chronic pain that shifting away from that took a lot of consistent work. So the first thing we're going to dive into is the Don't L.C.T.T. portion. And then in the second part of this video, we're going to talk about shifting. Don't look. Often people with chronic pain or chronic symptoms, we're always looking externally or internally at the symptoms that we're experiencing. So for example, one of my first symptoms that I had was right knee pain. And so externally, I was looking at my knee, constantly checking like, is my knee swollen? Does it look red? There's something weird going on with it? Like I was constantly looking at that area of the body and bringing a lot of focus to it. So a lot of people, they're externally looking at that area of the body, always kind of seeing if there's something astray, something going wrong. Now we can also internally look, where we're constantly checking internally on the sensations, looking for them, searching for them. Most people have this experience with chronic pain or chronic symptoms. When you first wake up in the morning, what do? You scan your whole body and you're internally looking for where are my sensations at? Are they getting worse throughout the day? What's taking place? And so we don't want to be always externally or internally looking for the sensations. Don't check. Another common thing we do when we have chronic symptoms is we're doing behaviors to check if the symptoms are still there, if they're getting worse, if something's been triggering them. We're always checking. So an example of a behavior is I would do a shoulder dance with my left or right shoulder, like I had pain in both sides. What I was doing is I was doing this shoulder dance, checking like, is there pain when I go like this? Is there pain when I go like this? What happens if I raise my arm? I would always be like going like this to check if the sensations were there. These behavioral way of checking is really common. Another common one with back pain, for example, is I'd be bending to the side, bending forward, checking if the sensation was there. Again, it's bringing so much intense focus, and not just focus, but fearful focus, where you're just searching. You're checking with all the little movements if your pain or physical symptoms are still present, if they're getting worse. And I would probably do this shoulder dance that I was describing all day long. Every couple of minutes I was doing it. And that's a lot of intense focus that we want to shift away from. Don't think. Having fear thoughts, despairing thoughts, hopeless thoughts, obsessive thinking, preoccupation about our symptoms can actually start to worsen them. And when it comes to neuroplastic pain and symptoms, it can trigger them and perpetuate them. And I've seen this pattern go on for decades. When I was in pain, I was probably thinking about my pain 80 or 90% of the day. My partner, Ann, would definitely confirm this. I was just thinking about it all the time. It was so intense in my mind, constantly thinking and trying to figure out and fix my symptoms. But this pattern kept my pain going. And now shifting away from your thinking is hard to do. And I'm going to cover the shifting portion in the later second half of this video. But the first thing is just starting to be aware. Starting to be aware how often your mind is drawn to your pain or physical symptoms, how much you're thinking about it, how much you're constantly having it on your mind. Because that awareness is essential. For myself, I just wasn't aware anymore. It just became second nature that I always think about my pain. So I really wasn't aware until I started to become observant of my mind of how often I was thinking about my pain. So this is the first step here, is you just want to start to catch that you're having these thoughts. And I also have a great skill called the 3R skill from Pain Reprocessing Therapy, is where it originates from. I'll link that video up to the top. That's a different skill, but you can check that out. It can be really helpful with fearful, despairing, obsessing thinking. Don't talk. How much are you talking about your pain or physical symptoms? When I'm working with a client in therapy, I'm telling them during therapy, sure, we're talking about your pain sometimes, we're exploring it, we're getting progress week to week. But I tell them outside of that, we really want to limit how much you're talking about it. Sure, if you want to talk about the mind-body strategies and have this hopeful feel of the different things you're trying out, that's a little different than talking about how bad your pain is today, or how much worse it's gotten over the last week, or, how you're never going to get better. Like when I was, with my partner and in pain, probably 80 to 90% of my conversations with her were about my pain. And that needed to shift. When I was first healing, I told my parents, I told my friends, I told my partner, Ann, you know what? I don't want to talk about this anymore. If I bring it up, sure, let's talk about it. Don't ask me about it. I just don't want to constantly be bringing my mind back there. So don't talk is an essential step for retraining your brain. Now I've covered the Don't L.C.T.T portion of the skill. Now we're moving to shifting. So instead of L.C.T.T, we want to shift. And what we're shifting to is something that brings about a sense of safety. When I am teaching people to shift, and this isn't done once a day, you're going to have to do this pretty repetitively at first. Maybe not all day. I don't want you to get obsessed about using this, but doing it once a day probably isn't going to be enough, because your brain has been so wired to constantly be looking, checking, thinking, talking about your pain. And so we need to teach it that when you catch it looking, checking, thinking, or talking, we're going to shift. And so we don't need to resist looking, checking, thinking, talking. So I'm saying it so many times, but we don't need to resist that, because it's like if I told you don't think of a purple rhinoceros. The first thing you do is you think about that. So we don't need to resist. We're shifting. We're shifting to something that brings about a sense of safety. So when I talk about cultivating safety and shifting with people, I talk about cognitively, behaviorally, and somatically. All three of these layers can bring about a sense of safety. Now, cognitively, Alan Gordon talks a lot about messages of safety for chronic pain, chronic symptoms. I call it safe self-talk. We want to have safe self-talk about our symptoms. So a message of safety, for example, could be reminding yourself of some of your neuroplastic evidence. My pain moves around. It is inconsistent. It's triggered by anxiety. It reduces when I'm calm. For this reason, I know my body's not damaged and I don't need to be focused on it right now. Or perhaps you're telling yourself, this pain flare, this symptom flare is temporary and it will eventually pass. Or maybe you want to get a little bit more sciencey and remind yourself all your muscles and tendons are perfectly healthy. All your ligaments and nerves are perfectly intact. This is a safe, normal, neutral sensation. My brain's just been feeling in danger for a long time, and that's why I'm experiencing these symptoms. But by using this approach, by using a brain and nervous system approach, I can unlearn my pain and symptoms and heal from this. So there's lots of safe self-talk you could be giving about your symptoms. You want to find ones that click for you. Now I have a whole breakdown of cognitive messages of safety on the channel, a video I'll link to the top. I even go through a brain retraining practice, where during a meditation, you're giving cognitive messages of safety. So definitely check that out because that could be really helpful. The next way you can shift towards safety is with behaviors. So instead of looking, checking, thinking, or talking about your sensations, you could shift to a behavior that brings about a sense of ease, a sense of safety, a sense of calmness. This could be going for a walk in nature. Perhaps it's playing with your animals. I have 2 cats and a dog. When I'm starting to get into a fear spiral about something, I'll go and intentionally play with my puppy Darla and have a great time with her. Or maybe it's watching your favorite TV show, watching some clips of comedy on your phone. Perhaps it's having a great conversation with a friend, really leaning into enjoying life. You're shifting to a behavior that brings about a sense of safety, calmness, and ease, and widens your life, widens your world. Chronic pain and symptoms, they shrink our life. And you're not to blame for this. This happened to me. They shrink our world. We avoid more and more, and we live less and less and less. But this causes your brain to feel more in danger. So instead of looking, checking, thinking, talking, you're shifting to a behavior that brings about safety and widens your world. To heal chronic pain, chronic symptoms, we need to start living life. The living life part happens first before your pain and symptoms start to reduce. I used to think, I need my pain or physical symptoms to reduce, and then I can start living life again. Then I can start approaching life. But the opposite happened. I slowly started to gradually start expanding my world, living life more. And then my pain and symptoms started to reduce because my brain started to get the message, oh, I'm actually physically safe. I'm actually okay. And the last way you can shift to safety is somatically. I have lots of somatic practices on the channel. This could be with present moment senses, going for a walk, feeling the sun on your skin, searching the sights around you, hearing the sounds of nature, using present moment sensing, shifting to that instead of looking, checking, thinking, talking, you're shifting to the present moment sensing. This could be using polyvagal breath work. I have one breath work on the channel that I'll link to the top that you can all check out. But shifting to taking 3 deep, slow breaths with an extended exhale. You might have to do this repetitively throughout the day, but you're teaching your brain, I am not going to be focused on my symptoms anymore. Instead, I'm going to shift to slowing down my breathing and calming myself. We can get a little bit more fancy with the somatic practices to cultivate safety. I have a few emotion practices on the channel. I have one on anxiety that I recently did that I'll link to the top. One of the ways we create safety is we approach emotions. This goes all the way back to Dr. Sarno, where he told people to not think physically, think psychologically. That's where we want to focus. And so approaching emotions, learning to feel safe with them, reducing the resistance to them, this can help you heal. There is research to support that. Dr. Schubert has done some amazing work here on just the benefits of actually starting to approach, explore, and release emotions. So there's that anxiety practice you can check out. I also have a sadness practice that you could all watch that could be really, really beneficial. So I'll link the sadness practice to the top. If you're feeling sad, you could shift. Instead of looking, checking, thinking, talking, I'm seeing how many times I could say that this video. Instead of doing that, shifting to processing your sadness. Another great thing is, somatic movement. This could be yoga. This could be Qigong. I'm a Qigong teacher. I have a few Qigong practices on the channel. I'll link one to the top. Again, you want to be careful here because I'm not trying to trigger more pain or symptoms for people. So you got to be graded with that. So feel free to modify those practices so they fit. But shifting to somatic movement can be really, really beneficial and really helpful in cultivating a sense of safety. So this is my video on the brain retraining skill, Don't L.C.T.T, shift. Again, we have to be really consistent, not too intense. We don't want to be doing this 500 times a day. That's probably way too much. But doing it, getting in the pattern of training your brain, I don't need to be focused on my symptoms. I can shift to safety. It's a really essential step that I used a lot when I was recovering. So try it out. If you have questions or comments, please put them down below. Hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you all soon. Take care.